Today, I want to talk about stubbornness and some of the ways I've found to overcome it in myself. I've always considered myself a stubborn person. So when I came across a social media post about stubbornness and stubborn people, I had to share it with my wife. And I'm like, okay, I guess this decides that once and for all, I am stubborn. And she pauses. She thinks for a moment. And she's like, "You're not stubborn." And I was surprised. I was like, "Really? I'm not stubborn?" I thought I was definitely a stubborn person. I thought you thought I was a stubborn person. It was such a relief. I thought all these years that I was stubborn. Turns out I wasn't. Then my wife continued. She's like, "No, you're not stubborn. You're opinionated." At that point, I just had to laugh. It's like, yes, you're right. I am definitely opinionated. So why do I share this? I consider myself a pretty introspective guy. And so I think I understand myself. But even I didn't get this. I wasn't able to differentiate between me being stubborn versus opinionated, etc. And so it's important to have people in our lives that are willing to be that mirror for us, willing to tell us the truth. But that only happens when, one, we're not afraid to hear the truth, and two, when people tell us the truth, they don't get punished for it. All right? To do that, we really have to accept ourselves, warts and all. And we also have to have a strong sense of self, of who we are and what we stand for in the world. It takes time, so don't beat yourself up, okay? I have done plenty of that for all of us. And there's really no end to this process. It's just a journey. So I wanted to take a moment and wish you and me both the best on this personal development journey. I wasn't always so not stubborn, just opinionated. I remember when I started college, I was exposed to people with very different identities, values, worldviews. And so as an example, one of my friends was an evangelical Christian, and me being a Muslim, I thought it was a good idea we have discussions about this. Bad idea, you say? I thought I knew better, and I was wrong. We would have these discussions. I'd get heated, he'd get heated, I'd get angry, he'd get angry. But it always baffled me. We shared so many values. So why was it so hard to have a conversation about faith and values that we shared? It turns out that our conversations really centered more on our labels more than our values. And our insecurity didn't help. It's because our conversations were so superficial that they centered around these superficial labels that we applied to ourselves that we really couldn't get to the values part of our conversation. We couldn't find that common ground. But when I changed my approach, when I started concentrating more on values, that's when I could have conversations with people of differing labels, identities, whatever you want to call it, even opposing ones such as evangelical Christian and Muslim, white, black, all these kinds of identities that sometimes people feel are irreconcilable, are fraught with danger and conflict. Even those kinds of conversations could be had because I started from a place of values, a deeper place where I could find that common ground with others. So, I want to share some tips that I've picked up over the years that have helped me. Tips that have helped me feel less reactionary. Tips that have helped me make better decisions. Tips that have helped me make changing my mind a bit easier. First, I want to take a step back. I want us all to kind of start from the same place and accept that, we're all opinionated. And that's okay. It's human. And two, we all hate change, and we hate changing our opinions. Again, very human. Why is it like this? As human beings, there are so many issues that surround us. Even as a child growing up, we see so much stuff going on in the world, in the news, in our family, in the community, and to formulate an opinion on all these topics without having adequate information, without having, a developed critical thinking ability would be impossible. And so when we're young, we kind of just absorb these ideas from those around us, our family, our friends, our community, and we really have one of two choices. We either accept them or we reject them. And then we internalize this and make it part of who we are. So how does this all play out? Imagine a tween, Billy, in the days following the 9/11 attacks. They're watching TV, him and his family, and they're having conversations. His parents talk about how evil Islam and Muslims are, and there's the irrefutable evidence right there on the TV. And Billy naturally internalizes this. He's like, yeah, Muslims are evil, Islam is evil. And he grows up with this. This opinion becomes part of who he is, part of his identity. Meanwhile, across town is another family, a Muslim family. There's a girl, Bushra, and she's listening to her parents talk about the attacks and as they watch the news. And their conversation is a little bit different. They're watching how all Muslims are being demonized for the acts of a few. And their conversation is about how evil white people are, and this just proves it. This just proves how racist and prejudiced they are. And again, she grows up with this idea. She internalizes it, and it becomes part of her identity. Neither of these opinions are based on fact. Neither of these opinions have been well thought out. Neither of these opinions are really founded. But these children will continue carrying these opinions until they are challenged. And so our worldviews follow something like Newton's first law of motion, which is that when an object is in motion, it will continue on that trajectory, it will continue in motion unless acted upon by an outside force. So in a similar way, our opinions will continue unless acted on by an outside force. What are these outside forces? These are challenges, the challenges that life throws at us, difficulties that make us rethink opinions, behaviors that we may hold. They can be something as simple as getting into arguments and fights. It can be losing a job. It can be getting a bad grade in school. It can be becoming depressed or anxious. It can be becoming paralyzed, being hospitalized, having health problems. All those things that we don't like happening to us, we would label as bad things. Those are the moments in our lives where we will reevaluate who we are and how we interact with the world. And as a result, we have two basic courses of action. We stay the course, we continue doing what we're doing, or we change course. We're like, okay, what I was doing was not working for me. I need to change what I think. I need to change how I behave. Let's go back to Billy. So Billy's all grown up now, and whereas as a young kid, he might insult other Muslim classmates, call them towel heads, terrorists, whatever. Now that he's grown up, he's joined hate groups. He'll call people and harass them on the phone. He'll attack them in public. And this has gotten him into some trouble. So the last attack landed him in jail. And the person he attacks is actually Bushra, the girl from our previous example. But Bushra has taken a slightly different path. Growing up, she had a lot of white friends. And they cared for her, they respected her, and she learned that the vast majority of white people are not evil. They're not racist. They don't demonize her for being a Muslim. They see her as an individual, and they respect her as an individual. So she has rejected the opinion of her parents and internalized a new narrative as a result. So each of these people, Billy and Bushra, both have a choice to make. Both of them have been acted upon by an outside force. They're facing a challenge that life has thrown at them. For Bushra, it's being attacked by Billy, and for Billy, it's being arrested. Will they stay the course, or will they change the course? So Bushra wakes up in her hospital bed and learns that she's paralyzed and will be for life. She goes through grief, but then thinks a little bit deeper and realizes that it was the compassion, it was the kindness, it was the love of her friends that removed that hatred that she had internalized, that removed that from her heart and caused her to love those around her, to see past the hate. And so she decides to invite Billy to forgive him, and she refuses to press charges, hoping that this act of kindness will also open his heart, cause him to see the good. And now Billy has a choice to make. Will he continue hating, even though it was not founded on anything other than a traumatic, tragic life event that he witnessed on television? Or will he see beyond that? Will he finally realize that, look, I have hated people without really knowing them, and now here's somebody confronting me and showing me kindness, respect, love, forgiveness, despite all the horrible things that Billy did to her. So what choice will he make? Will he stay the course? Are his convictions that strong? Or will he change the course of his life? Are those convictions in him, that kindness, that empathy, that desire to grow and improve, is that stronger in him than his hate? I used an extreme example here, but it's true for all sorts of life's challenges, large or small. We tend to see life's challenges as getting in the way of life, of us accomplishing our goals. But the way I look at these challenges, I see them as an opportunity. Who am I? And who do I want to be? And in those moments, I get to prove to myself, to the world, who I really am. I really want to shift our understanding around this issue. These horrific things sometimes that happen to us, sometimes annoying little things that happen to us, they're an opportunity. And I've started to see that, and it's shifted how I see the world. It's shifted how I interact with the world, and it's made me a much happier, more content person. In the end, it's our choice. Life isn't trying to torture us or punish us. It's just pushing at us. It's just trying to get us to make a decision, to realize, who are we? Who do we want to be? It's testing our convictions. It might be even indicating that we may have chosen wrong. We may be in need of a course correction. Our life may be in need of a course correction. But it's up to us to decide, who do we want to be? Either stay the course or change course. It's up to us. So when life beats us down, when we experience the loss of a parent, the loss of a job, the loss of something special to us, that's life asking us, who are we? Do we have the conviction to stay the course? Or do we have conviction to change course? Now, how do we decide which is the right way forward? Our values. If the convictions we have in our values are strong enough, then we stay the course. We stay the course when life gets hard and those convictions are challenged. But when life gets hard and we realize that we weren't living life according to our values, then it's time to change course. And the only question that remains is, do we have the strength to do that? How strong are those values, those convictions? But there's a pitfall, and it's something I hinted at earlier, because we do have these deeper values that we hold, but we also have these very superficial labels that also sometimes sneak in and become an important part of our identity, how we see ourselves and how we want the world to see us. So some of these superficial labels are things like our race. I'm white, I'm black, I'm Hispanic. They can be our political affiliation. I'm Republican, I'm Democrat. They can just be how we see ourselves. I'm smart, I'm weak, I'm dumb, I'm brave, I'm shy. I'm religious, I'm secular, I'm Christian, I'm Muslim, I'm Jew, I'm Hindu, I'm Buddhist. Any kind of political, religious, ethnic, racial identity that the world sees us on some level, more often than not, we're a mix. Our identities are a mix of these two things, these deeper values and these superficial labels. And sometimes those aspects of our identity, they go hand in hand. There's no conflict. But occasionally there's a conflict between them. As an example, I grew up with a lot of white Christian people, and they see themselves as very good, moral, upright people that look out for their neighbors. So if somebody came along and said white Christians ruined the world, their immediate reaction would be anger, hostility, aggression, because an important part of their identity, superficial or not, has been attacked. That means they've been attacked. If that same person, if you approached them and said, you know what, I hate how lies and deception and oppression have been used to hurt our fellow Americans, you know what? He might have found a receptive ear. He might have found somebody who agrees with him. He might have found a new friend. And it's an interesting phenomenon. I use the word deep and superficial to describe values and our labels, because there is something very grounding about values and something very unstable about the labels we apply to ourselves. A lot of times those labels, they're not really founded, or they're a very superficial aspect of a deeper belief system, a deeper set of values. And so when those superficial labels are attacked, we feel knocked off balance. We feel threatened. We feel endangered. And so we have two choices, fight or flight. We either respond or we just run away and we just don't want to have that conversation at all. If we want to be more confident, if we want to be less easily insulted, if we want to make better decisions, if we want to be able to change our mind based on new information, if we generally want to feel more stable and confident, it's really important we think about what makes us us. Are superficial labels an important part of who we are, of how we see ourselves? Or are we people who identify with deeper set of values? And if so, what are those values? It wasn't until I started questioning those superficial labels I applied to myself, some of those deeper values that I held. It wasn't until then that I really had a better understanding of who I was, of what I stood for, of my identity. And when I did, don't get me wrong, it's a scary process. But when we question ourselves, it's less off-putting, it's less destabilizing, it's less scary when we question our own identity. When we try to figure it out ourselves, than when we wait for somebody else to challenge those identities, challenge those values. And going through this process, ironically, I found that I could agree more with people who had opposing labels. And I found I disagreed more with people who shared my label, because I was approaching the world with my values at the forefront. And it tore down walls with others who I might feel threatened by. I was finally making decisions and connecting with people based on my values rather than my labels. And as a result, I learned to really appreciate nuance. If only more of us could get comfortable with our deeper values, with understanding and consciously deciding on those deeper values that we want to hold, it would help us to understand and respect one another and exist in peace with them, even in our differences. So, knowing who we are and what we stand for makes us less reactionary, makes decisions easier, and makes changing our minds in the face of new information easier. Again, because changing our minds doesn't change who we are. Shedding these superficial labels and what's expected of us, being a member of these superficial groups, we're no longer forced to identify with these labels and these kind of platforms that exist with these labels. We're not trapped in that identity anymore. We're free to explore the world and connect with people who share values. And even when we disagree with people, to see their humanity, to see the commonalities that do exist between us. So here's to your and my personal growth, our mental health, and to living in peace and harmony and tranquility with each other. Thank you, goodbye, and I wish you all the best.